Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's such a crazy time right now, but I'm blessed and I'm trying to look at my glass half full and I feel healthy and I feel good.
Great. And isn't that a blessing?
Yes, it is. Hallelujah.
Hmm.
Well, first of all, I have to say congratulations on being on the cover of Hollywood Reporter because that is also a ginormous deal and you should be so proud. Um, that's just mind-boggling. I've been looking at that magazine for years and years and years since I first moved here, and I can't wait to pick up my copy so I can see your face on it.
Well, congratulations to you on making it on the cover of Billboard Pride. That's really exciting.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. I can't believe it. It's such a surreal moment. I feel so flattered and honored when they reached out to me. I was like, is this a real thing? Is this really happening? And it just feels good because when I moved to LA, there was no call me by your name. There was no Glee, really. I mean, that had just started when I moved to LA. There was no Love Simon and Moonlight, those movies. Or there was no Pose. Like the world has drastically changed since I've lived in LA, and especially the entertainment world. And it has just been so insane to watch it all happen. And I'm so grateful to be alive during this time because I will be able to clear a path for my children and grandchildren to be in. But it's just been an insane experience, and I never thought that I would live to see the day that people would be out protesting, and not just black people, but white people, Hispanics, Asians, Middle Eastern, like everybody. When I walked and went to a protest the other day, it was just so surreal. Like I started crying immediately when I saw everybody outside because I couldn't believe it. It's something that I've been talking to about with my friends who have been empathetic as much as they could be based on their experience and listening to me. But for this to be happening right now is just something that I would not have ever predicted to happen. Not just me being on the cover of Billboard, but just all of the discussions that are so important that affect our country and the people that live in our country that make our country colorful and diverse and beautiful. And everybody wasn't having those conversations. It was very specific groups of people who were having them. And now everyone is being forced to have these discussions, and I could not think of a better time to be on the cover of Billboard magazine.
Agreed. It's really interesting too. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and I was telling her I really feel that 2020 is a tipping point. And while, there's been quite a lot of difficulties and adversities that this year has thrown at folks, I really do think that we will look back on this period of time and say that is where a shift happened. At least that's my hope.
That's my hope too.
And tell me what have those discussions looked like for you, whether publicly or privately?
Well, for me, I have been fortunate to be raised in musical theater and in a neighborhood that was very diverse, where I had a lot of white friends. A lot of my close friends who are people of color, whether they be African American or one of the other ethnicities under the rainbow, they have all, a lot of times my friends have told me that they don't feel comfortable having conversations with white people specifically about their experience being in America, being in the entertainment industry. And I have fortunately felt very comfortable to have those conversations, even if they get difficult and heated, because when you explain to somebody what their privilege looks like, especially before that vocabulary existed, 6 years ago, I didn't even know that the term white privilege existed. I just didn't know that that was something, that could roll off my tongue. And now it's something that I have a name to give to something that I was trying to articulate for so many years. But I've been fortunate enough to have friends who are willing to listen and have that conversation, and give me a place in my workspace where I felt, even when I was in a musical and I was the only person of color in several musicals and tours that I had done, it was awesome to be able to like speak to people and have them at least attempt to understand where I was coming from. But now I feel like everyone is having those discussions, and sometimes they are discussions that turn into arguments. But I would rather they be heated arguments that don't escalate to um, violence than for them to not be happening at all. So I'm just grateful that it's happening, and it feels like progress. It's been such a scary place to consider bringing a child into this world, like having a child and raising
Mhm.
a family It's one of my biggest goals in the world, but I've always been like, I don't know if I want to bring somebody into this world because as beautiful as it is, it's so scary and so evil and cruel, and humans can be so evil to each other.
The difficult time, we're dealing with a global pandemic, and there's so many protests happening right now because of the relationship between law enforcement and specifically Black people in this country. And 2020 has been quite a year. I think what's so important for anyone who may be listening to this conversation is to remember that, as opposed to continuing to duplicate art that we've already seen, let's not continue to just copy art, but let's actually be at the forefront of creating it.
Yeah.
Because I know that
Amen.
often, I don't know if this is the case in music. It sounds like from what you were saying it is, but I know in film and television, more often than not, what I end up hearing is folks want a version of a white story, and we just are going to put in Black or Latin or Asian people, and so you get a lot of remakes or duplicates of stories that we've already seen before. And it's like, we have our own stories to tell,
Yeah.
so just create space for us to do that.
And give us
Um,
the same budget and the same billboards and the same promotion and the same everything that you would have given had it been another show that featured mostly white people. Because that's another thing I see is they'll be like, okay, we'll give you this, but it's not going to be at the best time slot and it's not going to have the best promotion. It's not going to have this until you prove yourself. But it's almost like that even though you're trying to throw us a bone, you're not throwing us a bone really because you're setting us up to, we have to more than um, prove ourselves in order for us to now be considered equal when we didn't get the equal amount. There's a movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. called Men of Honor, and I watched that movie only a couple of years ago. And it just reminded me of so many experiences that I've had in the entertainment industry because I remember getting to Broadway at 20 years old and being taught by the people who had been doing Broadway for years and years. They were in Dreamgirls, they were in The Wiz, they were in The Wiz movie. These were people that were just like legendary Broadway performers. And they straight up told me, in order for you to make it in this industry, you have to be 3 times as talented as your white counterparts. You're going to have to be able to tumble and do backflips. You're gonna have to be able to sing higher. You're gonna have to be able to riff. You're gonna have to be able to outdance them just to be able to get the spot, the one spot that you're gonna want to get. And that is the reality of the situation. And that has been my experience. Um, and it's just really, really like difficult to accept that fact. And when I watched that movie, Man of Honor, I realized that they kept asking for him to give them the same results while intentionally not giving him the same tools and basically setting him up to fail. And he still, because of his pure talent and his drive, prevailed. And that movie is just so touching. I cried like 6 times watching it because just because it's a sad, gut, like a heart wrenching story, but it's also so true and it's so like relevant even still today. And it's been literally the my story. I feel like that every single time I've been signed to something or given an opportunity, I feel like I have to overachieve and over deliver in order to be equal, not even to over deliver to be then over thanked and over appreciated. If I over deliver, it's like, okay, great, we'll let you stay here now. And I don't like that feeling. And I hope that in the future that begins to change.
yeah, I think you what you just said is so important for people to hear, which is that, the reality in this country is that if you are a person of color, if you're Black, if you're Latinx, if you're Indigenous, if you're Asian, then you have to work 10 times harder than your white counterpart to see progress,
Yeah.
and even when you do, there will still be critiques and questions about how you got to that place. I'm thinking about conversations that I had with folks after the first season of Pose. I would go into general meetings, and within the first 3 questions, I would be asked some version of, what exactly did you do on that first season? Which was crazy to me, that I'm like, I still, even after having a season of a really successful show under my belt, I still have to prove my worth. I still have to prove, you know, how I managed to get that far in
Yeah.
my career. and it's maddening, but I think that with our work and with our visibility, we're changing that conversation. And I think that we
Yeah.
are starting to see a shift in our respective fields. And so I'm hopeful that living our
Yes.
lives openly and having this conversation.
Amen. I agree.
As I mentioned, I grew up in the Bronx, and that was, a tough experience because I was born in 1980, and this was on the heels of New York City coming out of the heroin epidemic of the late 70s, and specifically having been raised in the Bronx was burning, if you know about the history of that borough. And so then we go into the 1980s and we step foot into both the crack epidemic and HIV AIDS eviscerating
Yeah.
the LGBT community. And so it was a very bleak time for the city, and it was really tough. And I certainly didn't have models or people to look at to say, "Oh, that's what I want to strive to be." But from that experience, what I learned was lessons around family and love, and arguably most importantly, resilience. How to keep
Yeah.
fighting and how to maintain your voice and how to use it. And so I bring all of that with me into my work now as a storyteller, as a show creator, as a director. Um, and the journey of Pose was one that was tough. But again, I think my upbringing gave me the resilience to keep fighting because I really believe
Yeah.
so much in this story. But, the reality is that I wrote the first draft of that pilot in 2014 while I was at UCLA working on MFA in screenwriting. And then I went out into the industry and it was hundreds of no's. People just didn't want to invest in this story. It was too black, it was too queer, it was too trans, it was a period piece. And then on top of all of that, like I was new to the industry. And the reality is that we work in an industry that is risk averse.
Yes.
And so there wasn't anyone who was looking to invest in it. Um, but I'm fortunate in that I found collaborators and co-conspirators in Ryan Murphy and in FX as a network, and now we have this show that exists as a safe place for Black and brown, queer and trans people, and I'm so proud of it, and I'm so grateful for the reception that we have received, not only from our audience but certainly from critics. So it really truly is a blessing, and I wouldn't change anything.
No, I mean, you should be so proud. It makes me feel proud to watch it and to hear that people are having post parties and stuff and they are meeting up, and I get invited to so many parties and I'm like, I don't know which one I'm gonna go to it, for people to just sit down and watch it. And the parties turn into like I don't even know how to explain it just I don't know. It turns into like a Vogue battle by the end of it. It goes into like this big thing that makes you feel like you're a part of the culture, like you got sucked in through the TV. And I just have never experienced anything like that in my entire life. I never thought I would see a show like Pose that showed so many people that educated me because I am somebody who felt like I knew so much about the gay community and so much about New York and the HIV epidemic and the crisis that was happening during that time. Billy Porter has been a huge mentor of mine. And when I was in Kinky Boots and we were working on that, and he would give me like notes and help me out, he introduced me to this documentary called How to Survive a Plague. And I watched that documentary over and over and over again. I showed it to everyone that I knew because I think as a gay person that is like living right now in 2020, if you aren't aware of how much people had to fight for us to be able to live in a world where we have prep and we have solutions to these like issues that were so life threatening, and like it just I had heard the stories, but it all feels like a chapter in a history book that you read in school until you like get as close as you can to experiencing it, watching it through the eyes of the people who lived it, the people who lost their lives through it, and the people who stood beside them and fought and fought and fought and fought and laid their bodies out in the street to demand the attention that they deserved. that it just is incredible to watch. And I love that Pose touches on that so much and touches on specifically the Black community's experience during that time is just because we weren't really represented in that documentary that I watched. So for me to just to see the story that's being told, it just it makes me wish that I had been raised during that time because that would have been the family that I would have found, and I would have loved to have been a part of MJ's house and to have lived there and to be surrounded by all those beautiful, diverse people who would have helped me more so embrace who I was as opposed to trying to find similarities in people who I had no similarities with. So I don't know. I can't say enough how much it means that you fought and fought and fought to make that show a reality because it has changed so many lives. I know that you have to know that from the people that reach out to you, but it has honestly changed the game and changed so many lives. So you should be extremely proud.
Well, this conversation was really great. So thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
your candor and your honesty during it. It was really nice to chat with you and to
Thank
share
you so
space with you.
much.